The clink of glasses and hum of conversation filled the rustic café near the Canadian military base in Alberta. Locals and soldiers mingled easily in the warm afternoon atmosphere, all except for one table. Ryan Carter, sporting a USA cap and a smirk that screamed entitlement, lounged with his feet propped on an empty chair, voice carrying across the room. So I told him, "Buddy, that's not how we do things in America. We do it bigger and better." Ryan's laughter boomed as his companions offered polite chuckles. In the corner sat Sergeant Daniel Mercer, quietly enjoying his coffee and sandwich. His posture perfect but relaxed, the disciplined soldier's uniform was impeccable. A stark contrast to Ryan's loud tourist attire. Mercer's eyes briefly met Ryan's as the American scanned the room, looking for his next audience. "Well, look what we have here," Ryan announced, nodding toward Mercer. "One of Canada's finest. Hey, buddy, is that what passes for a military up here?" The café quieted slightly. A few soldiers at nearby tables exchanged knowing glances. Mercer simply took another sip of his coffee, unbothered. "What's the matter?" "No comeback," Ryan pressed, his confidence growing with each ignored jab. "I guess that's the difference between American soldiers and Canadian ones. We actually know how to stand our ground." Little did Ryan know that Sergeant Mercer had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, led a specialized tactical unit, and earned commendations for his exceptional combat skills. The very hands wrapped around that coffee mug had saved lives under circumstances Ryan couldn't begin to imagine. A server passing by whispered to Ryan's table, "I wouldn't mess with that one if I were you." Ryan's response was a dismissive wave. "Why? What's Captain Canuck gonna do? Apologize me to death?" The stage was set. The entire café seemed to hold its breath, sensing what Ryan couldn't. He was making the biggest mistake of his vacation. "So, let me get this straight," Ryan said, standing up and strolling toward Mercer's table. "You guys actually consider yourselves a real military? That's adorable." Mercer set down his coffee cup with deliberate calm. "Enjoying your visit to Canada?" His voice carried no hint of irritation, just polite inquiry. "It's quaint," Ryan replied, leaning against the wall near Mercer's table. "Like your little army. Back home, we have a real military. The best in the world, actually." "Glad you're enjoying yourself," Mercer said, returning to his sandwich. Ryan's brow furrowed, disappointed by the lack of reaction. "You know, I've always wondered, do you guys actually train, or just practice saying sorry in different languages?" A few uncomfortable laughs scattered across the café. A table of soldiers in the corner watched intently, their expressions a mix of amusement and second-hand embarrassment. "Our countries are allies," Mercer stated matter-of-factly. "We fought alongside each other for generations." "Yeah, but let's be honest. You're the sidekick, right? America does the heavy lifting while Canada tags along for moral support." Mercer simply smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he'd heard this all before, from people far more intimidating than Ryan Carter. "Nothing to say to that?" "Huh." Ryan pushed. "I figured as much. You know, where I'm from, if someone talks to you, you show some respect and answer." "Respect is earned," Mercer replied quietly. Ryan's face reddened. He was used to getting a rise out of people, and Mercer's composure was beginning to irritate him. The café had grown noticeably quieter, all eyes now shifting between the loud American and the composed soldier. "What's your name, anyway?" Ryan demanded. "Sergeant Daniel Mercer." "Well, Sergeant," Ryan said, layering the title with mockery, "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You're welcome." "The thing about Canadian soldiers," Ryan continued, voice growing louder as he addressed the entire café, "is that they're basically mall cops with better uniforms. No offense," he added with a smirk that made it clear offense was exactly what he intended. Mercer took the last bite of his sandwich, methodically wiping his hands on a napkin. His silence seemed to fuel Ryan's need to provoke. I bet you've never even seen real action. What do you guys do, patrol the maple syrup reserves? Ryan slapped his knee at his own joke. A woman at a nearby table muttered, "Someone shut this guy up." "Your American education is showing," Mercer finally responded, voice level. "Canadian forces have deployed in every major conflict alongside your troops. We've bled on the same battlefields." "Oh, look, it speaks," Ryan exclaimed, "and gets all poetic, too. Bled on battlefields. Give me a break." Two soldiers from another table stood up, but Mercer subtly raised a hand, stopping them. This was his conversation to handle. "You know what I think?" Ryan leaned in closer. "I think you wear that uniform because it's the only way people will take you seriously." "You're entitled to your opinion," Mercer replied, reaching for his wallet. "That's it. No defense of your national honor." "Man, you're proving my point." Ryan's frustration was growing visible. He'd expected anger, outrage, something he could feed off. Mercer's composure was robbing him of the confrontation he craved. "Look, I'm sure you're having a bad day," Mercer said, placing money on the table. "But this conversation is over." Ryan's face darkened. "It's over when I say it's over. You can't even stand up for yourself, can you?" Pathetic. The entire café was silent now, the tension thick enough to slice. Mercer stood up, revealing his full height, Uwaguabu, several inches taller than Ryan had anticipated. "I'd recommend finding another hobby," Mercer suggested. "Enjoy the rest of your stay in Canada." Ryan's hand shot out, grabbing Mercer's shoulder. "Don't walk away when I'm talking to you." The café collectively inhaled. Mercer looked down at the hand on his uniform, then back to Ryan's face. "Remove your hand. Now." "Or what? You'll write me a strongly worded letter?" Ryan sneered, tightening his grip. "Come on, tough guy. Show me what Canadian soldiers are made of." "You don't want that demonstration," Mercer warned, his voice dangerously quiet. "Last chance. Walk away." Ryan, emboldened by his own bravado, gave Mercer a slight shove. "Make me." What happened next occurred so quickly that many in the café would later disagree about the exact sequence. Mercer's right hand moved in a precise arc, breaking Ryan's grip. In the same fluid motion, he stepped to the side, swept Ryan's leg, and used the American's own momentum to guide him firmly, but without excessive force, face first onto an empty table. 3 seconds. That's all it took. Ryan found himself pinned, one arm twisted behind him at an angle that promised pain if he struggled. His cheek pressed against cold wood, his pride in free fall. "Did he even move?" someone whispered. "What just happened?" "Another," voice asked. Mercer maintained the hold effortlessly, applying just enough pressure to immobilize without injuring. He leaned down, voice low enough that only Ryan and those at the nearest tables could hear. "Canadian Armed Forces, Joint Task Force. 2. I've served 3 tours in combat zones you couldn't find on a map. The difference between us isn't the uniform or the country. It's that I don't need to prove anything to you." Ryan's face flushed deep crimson, his mouth opening and closing without producing words. The realization dawned slowly. Oh yeah, he'd just challenged one of Canada's most elite Special Forces operators and been dispatched with embarrassing ease. "Now," Mercer continued calmly, "are we done here?" Ryan managed a quick nod, his bravado evaporating in an instant. Around them, the café remained in stunned silence, witnessing the fastest and most decisive humbling many had ever seen. Mercer released his hold and stepped back smoothly, adjusting his uniform with a casual tug. Ryan remained frozen for a moment, then slowly pushed himself up from the table, his face a portrait of shock and humiliation. The café erupted in murmurs and poorly concealed laughter. A group of soldiers at the corner table raised their coffee mugs in silent salute to Mercer, who acknowledged them with a slight nod. "He didn't even break a sweat," a woman whispered to her companion. took him down like he was handling a rowdy. "Kindergartner," another added. Ryan straightened his shirt with trembling hands, desperately trying to reclaim some dignity. I wasn't ready." "Would you like me to count to 3 next time?" Mercer asked, his tone genuinely curious rather than mocking. A burst of laughter rippled through the café. Ryan's ears burned red as he looked around, realizing he had become the entertainment he'd so desperately wanted to provide. "I was just joking around," Ryan mumbled, his voice having lost all its previous volume and bravado. "Can't you people take a joke?" An older gentleman at a nearby table shook his head. "Son, I've been coming to this café for 15 years. That man," he pointed to Mercer, "has never once bragged about what he does or where he's served. But everyone here knows. Everyone except you, apparently." Ryan swallowed hard, the full weight of his miscalculation sinking in. He had walked into a room full of people who knew exactly who Daniel Mercer was, and had made himself the fool in front of all of them. "Look, I didn't mean anything by it," Ryan tried again, his voice smaller still. "Just having some fun." "Fun," Mercer repeated, as if testing the word. "Is that what that was?" Ryan had no answer. For perhaps the first time in his adult life he was completely, utterly speechless. "Let me explain something," Mercer said, pulling out a chair and gesturing. For Ryan to sit, it wasn't a suggestion. Ryan sat down heavily, aware of every eye in the café fixed upon their table. His earlier swagger had vanished so completely it might never have existed. "The problem with assumptions," Mercer continued, sitting across from him, "is that they can get you hurt. In my line of work, they can get you killed." "Look, I get it," Ryan interrupted, desperate to end the situation. "I was out of line." "No, I don't think you do get it." Mercer's voice remained calm but carried an undeniable authority. "This isn't about America versus Canada. It's not about whose military is better or stronger. It's about respect." A server approached with a fresh coffee for Mercer, carefully avoiding eye contact with Ryan. "You walked in here believing you knew everything worth knowing," Mercer continued after a sip of his coffee. "You decided, without evidence, that I was beneath you, that my service was a joke, that my country's contributions weren't worthy of respect." Ryan stared at the table, unable to meet Mercer's steady gaze. "The truly strong don't need to announce their strength," Mercer said. "They don't need to tear others down to build themselves up, and they certainly don't mistake restraint for weakness." The café had grown silent again. But this time it wasn't the tense silence of anticipated confrontation. It was the quiet of people listening, absorbing a lesson being delivered with surgical precision. "I could have broken your arm just now," Mercer stated matter-of-factly. "I didn't, because there was no need. That's not weakness. That's control." Ryan nodded slowly, the words penetrating his embarrassment. "The most dangerous people I've ever met," Mercer said, leaning forward slightly, "were often the quietest people in the room." "So, what happens now?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You want me to apologize to everyone here? Make some big speech?" Mercer shook his head. "I don't care what you say. I care what you learn." Around them, the café had begun to return to its normal rhythm, though many still cast glances their way. The spectacle was over, but its impact lingered. "Look at the soldiers in this room," Mercer said, nodding toward the various uniformed personnel scattered throughout the café. "Every one of them has a story. Everyone has made sacrifices you know nothing about. Not just Canadians or Americans. British, Australian. Every soldier from every country deserving of basic respect until they prove otherwise." Ryan's gaze swept across the room, seeing the uniforms he'd mocked with new eyes. "The patch on my shoulder doesn't make me better. Or, worse than the patch on an American uniform," Mercer continued. "We fought together, trained together, died together. Your ignorance dishonors that brotherhood." Ryan winced at the word ignorance, but couldn't deny its accuracy. "I don't know what you do back home," Mercer said, finishing his coffee, "but I hope no one judges your entire profession, your entire country, based on 5 minutes of watching you at your worst." The statement hung in the air between them, a mirror held up to Ryan's behavior that reflected an image he hardly recognized, and didn't like. "I'm not usually like this," Ryan offered weakly. "Then be the person you usually are," Mercer replied simply. "Or, better yet, be the person you should be." With that, Mercer stood, nodded once to Ryan, and turned to leave. "Sergeant," Ryan called, finding his voice at last. "I'm sorry." Mercer paused, then glanced back. "Prove it by how you act tomorrow." The café door closed behind Mercer with a gentle chime, leaving Ryan alone at the table in a room that no longer seemed interested in his presence. The moment of high drama had passed, leaving in its wake the quiet aftermath of a lesson learned the hard way. A middle-aged woman in civilian clothes approached Ryan's table, setting down a glass of water. "Thought you might need this," she said, with a sympathetic smile. "Thanks," Ryan muttered, genuinely grateful for the small kindness. "First time meeting Sergeant Mercer, I take it?" Ryan nodded, taking a long drink. "He teaches hand-to-hand combat to Special Forces units from 6 different countries," she informed him casually. "Including yours." Ryan nearly choked on his water. "You're kidding." "Nope. My husband works on base. Says Mercer could take down a grizzly with his pinky finger, but you'd never know it talking to him." As she walked away, Ryan sat in silence, absorbing everything that had happened. The shame still burned, but something else was taking root alongside it. A grudging respect, not just for Mercer, but for the quiet professionalism he represented. He glanced at his reflection in the café window. His USA cap now seemed less a point of pride and more a symbol of the arrogance he'd displayed. With a decisive motion, he removed it and tucked it into his pocket. Outside, life continued. Tourists snapped photos of the picturesque Canadian town, unaware of the small drama that had unfolded in the café. Somewhere, Sergeant Mercer had already moved on with his day, the incident likely forgotten. But Ryan knew he wouldn't forget. Not the humiliation, not the lesson, and certainly not the 3 seconds that had changed his perspective completely. "Real strength," he murmured to himself, recalling Mercer's words, "doesn't need to announce itself." For the first time in a long while, Ryan Carter was listening instead of talking, and in that silence he was finally hearing something worth remembering.